This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders. October 17th, 2017. The Guardian publishes an article that reads as follows. All Blacks dominance threatens the health of international rugby. Never in the history of sport has there been an international team as dominant as the All Blacks. The yawning gap between the All Blacks and the rest of the world threatens to turn Test rugby into a great big yawn. It is not beyond the realms of possibility that they may still remain undefeated until they lift the Webb Ellis Cup again in Japan in 2019. Fast forward a few years, and who knew all the All Blacks needed to bring down their own empire to end the era of utter ascendancy was to piss off Peter O'Mahony. On Saturday, July 19th, 2022, Irish rugby might have seen its proudest ever day, as they did what nobody has ever done in professional rugby before and defeated New Zealand in a 3-test series on New Zealand soil. If Ireland had merely scrapped out 2 victories more similar to their wins in Dublin, it would have been an all-time impressive feat nonetheless. But instead, for around 120 of Test 2 and 3's 140 minutes, Ireland dominated the All Blacks in much the same way the Kiwis themselves did everyone else not so long ago. So, how did Ireland so comfortably crush the All Blacks in those second 2 tests? And from a New Zealand perspective, was this rock bottom or is this just the start of a free fall? And all 3 of those tests began with a free fall themselves. Whilst New Zealand were able to pull it back in game 1, this was 3 successive games where Ireland scored inside the first 5 minutes, and none of them were fluke tries, breakaways, intercepts, or anything other than superbly constructed, well-worked, slick team scores that really set their marker down. And I think Andrew Porter's opening try from the second test demonstrates the difference between the 2 teams perfectly. This begins with New Zealand line out, but James Ryan disrupts it brilliantly, and then Gibson Park and sentient spite sandwich Peter O'Mahony drive Cody Taylor back almost 15 whole metres, and whilst Ireland pile the pressure on, Retallick does something quite smart. Instead of clearing out, he just blocks Tyg Byrne getting to the ball, meaning a major jackal threat has to clear him out instead of contesting the ball. It means Papali'i and Fainga'anuku can clear out and Surveyor can then pick and go. However, as Papali'i gets up from the ruck, instead of herring it to clear out, he retreats to the wing, meaning Fainga'anuku, a winger himself, has to go in and clear out. They're going backwards, so Aaron Smith wisely, correctly, opts to kick, but he doesn't check to see whether he has anyone in place to chase. As such, the laziness of Papali'i means Mac Hansen can take it under no real pressure, there's no one chasing, and take it on his own terms, going forwards. The All Blacks have essentially surrendered the ball in almost exactly the position the line-out took place, and Ireland set shape instantaneously. They're in structure, and whilst Jalber's Sexlop carries the ball, Doris just plays heads-up rugby. Taylor has shot out the line and totally disconnected from the rest of his defence, and it allows Van der Thea to batter through the wall like his childhood pet wildebeest Pete, and Ireland's ball is faster than that wildebeest. And just check Robbie Henshaw's line. Tauvau is focused only on him, so when Kane also flies up, Sexwell can isolate him and hit Byrne, and Byrne not only breaks the line, he obliterates it. The Barretts actually do a really good job of lining him up and making sure he can't get the pass away, shutting this line break down, but this is no consequence to Ireland. The ball is once again played at Pete's speed, and Porter crosses the gain line whilst the other players get into shape again before pulling from their enormous playbook of phase shapes. It's the same move that eventually unlocked the defence 1 week earlier, but instead here it's being used to give Lower one-on-one collision, which he wins with ease and generates utterly ludicrously rapid ball. Bowden trusts Surveyor to double job, which is fair considering he's been carrying about half the team on his back this tour, and so steps in for the intercept, trying to bait Sexwelly into the hospital pass to Ringrose. But instead, he lobs a perfect pass to Hansen, who can't beat Barrett, but instead offloads to O'Mahony, who somehow keeps it in play brilliantly. Ireland then play in field, then set into what's known as a hit boot shape. This just refers to 2 forwards off Sextree, the hit, and then Keenan in the boot. He's kind of the space directly behind the play. It allows Sexual to select based on the defence. So he hits Keenan, however, Henshaw is Ireland's widest possible man. He's the end of the earth. And when he takes it in, New Zealand figure it's so Ireland can keep stretching them blindside, working them in the same direction, something they did all the time in the Six Nations. And it's helped by Caelan Doris spreading to this wing, making a huge song and dance about it, meaning Geordie Barrett goes and starts screaming to watch him. But instead, it's all just a trick to stretch New Zealand. Some lovely interplay hides the real function here, which is just Josh van der Fleer bumping Barrett, meaning Mac Hansen can straighten and Scott Barrett only makes a fairly shit tackle which Surveyor has to finish off, Hansen almost up to the line. George Bauer, meanwhile, has put in maybe the most hilariously pathetic attempt at cheap shot on an opposition 10 you'll ever see, and is so slow to get back into line. He gets caught offside, so Tyburn runs at him, his back is turned, so there's barely a chance he can make a tackle, never mind a dominant one, and it's a guaranteed gain line success for Ireland to play off. But whilst Ireland reset their attacking shape incredibly well, the All Blacks defence is once again kinda lazy. There are only 2 Irishmen on this side, yet 6 All Blacks cover. The only Kiwi who actually falls around to this side of the ruck, where Ireland are actually attacking, is Brodie Retallick, and it means the All Black defence is spread super thin. They don't have the resources to cover this. Keep an eye on Gary Ringrose as well here, right? He starts here and folds around into New Zealand outlines outside Keenan, and it means Tupaia is now watching Keenan, assuming the ball is going with him, with Ringrose, Henshaw and Doris all in motion outside him. Instead, Sex Cartoon spies Tupaia's eyes on Keenan and just sends the biggest bloke they've got right into his face. Porter smashes through him and then smashes over for a gorgeously constructed try. Ireland's attack is so impressive because every shape they set has so many options. In this way, it's a lot like everyone's favourite website builder, Squarespace. For Ireland, it's a playmaker, usually Jamhouse X Crisp, but they're increasingly using Mac Hansen or Hugo Keenan to run things too, calling a shape that they want to see from the players around them, whereas Squarespace is offering an incredibly simple interface with easy tools, box outs, countless tools to make it as lovely as possible to make a beautiful website. And then, just the Irish attack gives every player within that shape multiple options, several people to pass to, as well as carrying themselves. Squarespace, within that interface, gives you so many incredible features, to be utilised to create your perfect website. For some, it might be the store building features. For others, it's the ease to create a blog, or to create a gallery to showcase a portfolio, a stunning gallery at that. The ability to write pages and pages of articles to showcase stuff you've done in the past. And whereas running the entire Irish attack might be a bit too much, you can do the next best thing, which is sign up to Squarespace. By just clicking the link in the description, you can do it so easily, and even use the offer code SquidRugby to save yourself some moolah. But there's no such budget approaches on anything about the Irish attack. It's incredibly structured, planned and rehearsed without ever being robotic, and that makes it pretty sumptuous to watch. Off this scrum, Ireland interestingly send Hugo Keenan in to carry, one of their smaller players, but it means they can save players back. Henshaw is great at clearing out, so it means they only need to sacrifice one forward in Peter O'Mahony, meaning the rest of the pack can charge around the corner as a horrifying unit, battering into the All Blacks. Van der Fleer then pins Surveyor on the ground, but it should be okay, right? Only 3 All Blacks are sucked in here and 4 Irishmen in the ruck. However, whilst Aaron Smith spots exactly what Ireland have coming and starts screaming at his forces, George Bauer here doesn't listen. So Smith comes in and starts literally slapping him to get him to shuffle and fill the huge gap. Fill where he's needed. But he's so lazy, he doesn't. It means Taylor and Laulala then have to watch the 2 forwards, and it leaves this picture, right? David Avili and Bowden Barrett have 5 men to cover between just 2 of them. Barrett makes a decision to go for the intercept, knowing the tighter space means it's more likely that Avili will come in and cover these 3, but this is just where the Irish system comes into its own. 1 tiny defensive lapse by the All Blacks, and Sex Jones can hit either centre depending on which of Barrett or Havili is left to do the triple job. Archie bursts through and Henshaw then scores. But if Bauer listens to his 9 and instead marks someone, he fills in here and all the All Blacks can move out a little bit, and this try is never scored. In the 1987 Rugby World Cup, this dog ran onto the pitch whilst New Zealand were playing Argentina and did a big piss in the middle of the field.
Oh dear, he's now in front of 35,000 people, a live telecast to Argentina. He has disgraced himself, the dog.
And whilst he was led off the pitch to safety, it seems he's since been hired as the All Blacks defensive coach, because whilst you might commonly hear players refer to their time without the ball as D, with the All Blacks, I'm pretty sure that stands for dog shit. And when facing an attack so built on punishing any moment where an opposition disconnects from the man next to them, forget about it. You're staring down the barrel of a substantial loss. The All Blacks did well to keep these games to only 30-odd points. It'd be forgivable if the All Blacks attack was actually up to anything, but instead it was so easily smothered by Ireland. In the first test, New Zealand deployed one really interesting innovation where they made the most of Aaron Smith's insanely accurate passing ability by doing this, repeatedly hitting the outside man, using a structure built for playing off 10, but played off 9 opinion instead, just using the fact Smith can do that, is something I went into detail on when covering the first test. You can go and look at that if you want, as it led to 3 of the All Blacks' 5 tries in that game. But I also said at the time, it's something I reckon Andy Farrell can work out a way to shut down in 7 days, and, well, yep, he managed that. Here, New Zealand take it off kick return and Smith immediately hits the outside man, which allows Retallick to cross the game line, but instead of contesting the breakdown as usual, O'Mahony and Burns spread out. They just leave it. It means there's no room for New Zealand to run this, so Ringrose can shoot up, and suddenly Jordie Barrett has no option for taking himself, opposite a gaggle of forwards. And once again, Ireland stand off the breakdown, meaning they can spread thin. So, when Smith goes to miss ball again, it's easy for Van der Fleer. Hitting the outside man means Retallick can only carry himself or hit Barrett, who in turn only has his Funhouse mirror clone as an option. It's so predictable Van der Fleer can cover all 3 himself. And, after one more phase, Smith goes for it again, but again, Van der Fleer is waiting opposite. The All Blacks give up, no momentum made, they just kick it away. For a tactic so devastating in the first test, Ireland dismantled it with such ease, so easily. By being more selective of which breakdowns they hit than in the first test or the Six Nations, Ireland were able to get Josh Van der Fleer into position to kill their momentum. And even when Van der Fleer wasn't there, check the way Tyke Byrne here sees it coming and lines up the third man to take the intercept. It's so simple but desperately effective. And then, even when most exasperated, even with the 10 forced to fill in this channel, which should be a game line success for the All Blacks, you see why they're going for it here, Ireland are so well drilled and smart enough that Joey Carberry is flying in to make the same read that Van der Fleer and Byrne were, repeating the trick. It all left the All Black attack mostly toothless, Ireland wrapping up their world-class players. Last year we saw just how deadly the likes of Will Jordan can be in broken field scenarios, running on counter-attack, yet Ireland for 3 games now just gave him no space whatsoever. Both sides' kicking tactics were extremely similar in this series, averaging 30.6 and 30.8 metres per kick, but Ireland just chased better. Here the All Blacks set up the kick, but the only chaser, Jordie Barrett, is nowhere near where the kick is going to land and has to cut in, meaning Keenan can take the ball without any pressure on him. Ireland just play it out and Ringrose can pin them back to outside their own 22. But Ireland, no such bullshit. The chase is always perfect and the forwards tend to then swarm, meaning there's no way out for the Barretts or Jordans of the world. And so, it's telling the only real moment of Jordan being properly dangerous all series came in an entirely different scenario. Will Jordan starts here on the right wing, but as the kick comes in, he sniffs out that there may be a chance later on. With this fumble adjusting the defensive picture, Byrne here had only Hansen and Furlong outside him, and King Potato understandably calls a backup. So Byrne and Keenan both are blind, kinda making the opposite error to George Bauer and working too hard. Yet there should be support there, because Byrne steps out assuming Caelan Doris will fill this gap. But this phenomenal bit of shithousery by Cody Taylor, so far off the ball the referee won't see it's behind his back, means no Irishman can fill the hole. And Aldi Surveyor's body language then is perfect. He never once looks at the gap or Jordan inside him, signalling instead he's going to hit Tupou on his tip-on line. And Jordan's timing then also excellent, remaining hidden from the Irish defence until the last second, while communicating clearly with Surveyor so he knows exactly what he's going to do. Jordan breaks the line, and from here, everything else is just bullshit. It's just kinda, Will Jordan is bullshit, the finish is bullshit, this whole thing is just a little bit daft. It's a moment of isolated brilliance that's kinda all New Zealand are able to conjure at the minute. It's all they have. Where Ireland put in an incredible team performance, all New Zealand had in reply was a few isolated moments of magic from Aldi Surveyor, Will Jordan, and, in that third test, frankly, quite exceptional performance by Beauden Barrett, who, on the quiet, put in one of the best displays from a 10 you'll ever see in a team being dominated. Legendary Welsh 10 Barry John once said the best way to get the most out of an attack, if you're playing 10 in a shite team, is attacking kicks, because anyone of any skill level, no matter how bad, can chase and dive on a ball. And boy did Beauden need to rely on that on Saturday, because the poor lad was getting absolutely nothing from the players around him. This kick for Jordan to chase is phenomenal. It's so good it almost turns a terrible attack where the defence is on top into a try, and this additional kicking helped limit Ireland and open up space that, none of his teammates could do anything with. This is a superb example of the kind of thing he was doing all game, particularly the first kind of 60 minutes. With Rico Ioane offering him no real option here, Barrett sends a brilliant kick over Hansen's head. It bounces, but this is only important because it gives Beauden the time he needs to get into the backfield, because he knows exactly the reply Hansen is about to make. He stood perfectly where Hansen hits it and regathers it himself, and suddenly has 20 metres to run into, but none of the players around him help him out. Geordie stands back shouting at him like their mums just called them in for tea, and none of the other backs go with him. None of the forwards are attempting blocks to kind of prevent the Irish chase getting to him, to open any gaps. This kick and the anticipation of what's coming next is tantamount to Barrett making a 15-metre break, which everyone would fawn over. He's just made 20 metres for the All Blacks here, quite easily, as well as disorganising the defensive line. But what happened next is like all of his teammates just refusing him any kind of support as he makes it. I can't help but feel for Bodie, the only player who seemed to see the limits in what the All Blacks were running and was using his individual talents to stretch the structures and try and make more of them, when if ran as Foster and Moore wanted them to go, they resulted in situations like this, running a super predictable play the All Blacks have been running for about 4 years now, and it's so easy for Henshaw to just shut down and smash him. But if we're going to talk individual performances, well, I might as well just read off the Irish team sheet. But instead, I suppose, let's do a speed round of hyper praise. Tadhg Beirne is a weapon of genius and incredibly athletic octopus, all rolled into one blaringly bright scrum cap. Look at the way he sneaks around the Kiwi forwards to collapse more than win out of the turnover. His ridiculous tentacles are such jackal threats, stealing All Black ball like his Bundy Oki spying a lady with some chicken. His limbs and stats are so equally absurd, he's the only guy in the world who I reckon could probably jackal himself. Peter O'Mahony, returning to the site of his career's 2 lowest ebbs, might be tough for some players, but for Peter O'Mahony, a man whose core strength comes not from training in the gym, but the sheer number of chips carried on his shoulders, it just makes him stronger. Somehow, the world's most Irish-looking man has put together possibly the best 380 minutes of his career back to back, and in games that constitute an Everest. He's been unbelievable this last month. There are those who seem convinced that I have some sort of anti-Irish bias, right? But how could I ever be biased against a team with this guy on it? And likewise, whilst as a Wales fan I spent last month shouting against the Springboks, one South African I'll never tire of seeing is Josh van der Flier. He's just relentless, the kind of player who is massive, yet somehow more than runs his weight, hits harder than you'd expect, and is harder to clear out than Pete would be. And yet also showed up well for his try to kickstart the third test. Now, we're used to seeing hefty locks propel their team's more forwards after they've secured the lineup, but Ireland take this to another level. As James Ryan descends to terra firma, lifter Tadhg Beirne turns his back into the gap in the lineout. This may not look like much, but he essentially just made these two players completely redundant in New Zealand's counter shove by forcing them onto the outside and splintering them off. Ioane gives up and leaves the ball. Beirne finds a new target, as who should appear in front of him but Sam Whitelock and Brodie Retallick, who I think he's probably heard of. Beirne shifts his focus from pushing them all to pulling Retallick and Whitelock, two of the strongest maul defenders on the planet, out the game. Beirne's octo limbs gangle the pair from the maul, granting Ireland the momentum for Joburg's finest to flop over. Jerkwad Sexlomb! He looks done, overspent for about the 17th time a year ago, but his form this tour has convinced me that I'm going to be stuck coming up with stupid nicknames for this dingbat forever. He's never going to stop, and I'm never going to get to rest. And then we have Hugo Keenan, and after the first kind of dip of form in his career at the tail end of the domestic season and first test, man alive has Keenan responded. He was possibly man of the match for me on Saturday. His high ball work, cover, angles of running, so intelligent, and his try so well taken. After this initial maul doesn't go anywhere, Ireland look wider. They play out the back twice, first to Sexton and then to Hansen. Now, with the All Blacks defence being dog shit, it doesn't take much for the Green Boys to find their entire back three attacking against just two, Jordan and Ioane, who both sit slightly too tight, allowing Lowe to burst down the left flank. Ireland play a phase in field, and as things reset, Gibson Park looks up 3 times to check the blind side, and who she see? Exactly the 2 same players who got caught short 1 minute ago. But here's the thing, right? The ball is slow, and so New Zealand do have a chance to fill this out and cover the space. Except, as Nepo Laulala begins to fill in as he fills over here, your friend of mine, George Bauer, specifically tells Laulala not to help him cover this side. Let's have a look at how that went, right? As soon as the ball's available, Gibson Park plays it away. And who should he find that side once again but the entire Irish back three? Hansen's timing on this pass is brilliant, and Hugo Keenan's line is gorgeous. He doesn't just want the ball, he wants to hold Jordan for a second, knowing that's all Lowe will need to break away. He's flat enough that he's still a threat, but deep enough that Hansen can thread the pass across him. It's beautiful by Keenan, who just feels this whole thing out in his head. As soon as the ball leaves Hansen's hands, he's sprinting into the space in front of him, trusting Lowe will make the break, knowing all he has to do is beat the All Black cover to the space. And, won't you know it, he does it, he gets his reward in the form of 5 points to his name and a healthy extension to Ireland's lead. If Bauer, however, shuffles out and allows Lalal to take a spot, both backs can also shuffle and allow them to cover low. As it is, the Irish back three can execute this overlap perfectly, with Keenan just being absolutely phenomenal here. Ireland are a team constantly evolving. They've got better every single campaign under Andy Farrell, and it's not because they've changed things, but because they've simply learned what they're doing better and added new components to the game, added new tweaks, new plays, new structures, ideas. They're hugely, hugely satisfying to watch and feel like they're truly pushing the game forwards. The All Blacks, on the other hand, are on the complete opposite trajectory. Actually, they're not really on a trajectory. They're not getting worse. They're just standing exactly still. Every other team in the top 10 has improved notably in the last 3 years, even the ones who are now worse results-wise than they were 3 years ago. The 2022 All Blacks are exactly the same as the 2019 All Blacks, but they're playing teams with 3 further years of innovation, ideas, alterations to their approaches, and indeed, the only innovation we've seen from the All Blacks since was the dynamic new off-9 game plan in the first test, which A, was figured out in 1 week, and B, was implemented during the 1 week where Joe Schmidt took over for Ian Foster when he was unavailable. Just to whisper that, maybe Foster's holding stuff back for the World Cup like we know Eddie Jones is. Or maybe he's just far, far out of his depth. There's only one way we can possibly answer that question. We can possibly know for certain, but that's going to take 18 months to find out. And it might be a risk too far for New Zealand rugby. And whilst we could go into the World Cup implications for Ireland, I don't think that's a task for today. No matter how shoddy the All Blacks side, this was still unprecedented territories. They're still the bloody All Blacks. And so it required a team who were ruthless, brutal, and oh so committed. Endlessly heartfelt and ever impassioned. What we've seen these last 2 weeks will be remembered for a very, very long time to come. And suggests, to me, international rugby is in very, very rude health. And so Ireland defeated the All Blacks. So thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. There's more on the Wales games. There's the first test from England-Australia. There's one on the first test as well where New Zealand won, if you can remember back when that used to happen. There's loads more around the channel. I'm going to look at USA-Chile next. That's the next one kind of on the docket, as it were. And I will see you very soon for plenty more rugby.
Well, it's just never quite goes right, does it?